Nature's Homage. Civilization, with the consuming power of quicksilver, dissolves into itself the wild places of the world, where great forests once stood, gloomy buildings with high angular chimneys now darken narrow cobbled ways. Natural grandeur has been swallowed up in the sordidness of human construction. Here and there, however, may yet to be found spots where man has not encroached, where the sound of the axe, the cries of the woodsman, and the rumbling of logs have not broken the primeval stillness. One by one, the savage denizens of the wild, the beasts untamed, have retreated into these scarce-trodden fastnesses before the deadly onslaught of civilization, whence from lonely crag and primeval wilderness they gaze out with furtive eyes and watch the relentless advance of that dread power which would destroy their lives. In a certain land, there is a majestic mountain range, which lifts its towering peaks, with rough and densely wooded sides, like great supplicating arms to the skies. From out the verdant luxuriance of the tree and shrub, mighty straggling monarchs of the forest tossed high, their branches, as though to grasp in their trembling fingers the clouds and hover over them. A narrow trail, barely a footpath, winds up to these mountains. Here and there it leads over loose rocks and broken boulders, and from stone to stone across some waterfall that descends, like a stream of crystal from the snow-covered peaks far above. There is no silence in that wood, for there is ever a rippling, ever a swishing, ever a sighing, as from the mountains trickle numberless streams, or through the treetops the winds whisper its message to any listening ear. Up this narrow path climbs an occasional hunter, for the deer still peer shyly out of the thickets or spring from rock to rock, or dart fleetly among the scrub growth that clothe the precipitous slopes on either hand. Here, too, the mountain lion lurks, and at night, with shining eyes, gazes out from the darkness at the campfire of the hunter. Here also abound wolves and foxes, and in the lower valleys prowl coyotes that yap an incessant protest as the shades of evening gather. Mayhap an awkward bear crosses the path and waddles along on his short, ungainly legs. It is the joy place of the hunter, who, with the glee of the sportsman, slays to prove the merit of his aim. Many stories are told of these mountains, many legends fashioned by the minds of ancient dreamers and perpetuated by their descendants, but the strangest of all is the story of the old man of the mountain. It is said that somewhere up in these hills lived a hermit who had dwelt there many years, as far back as the old hunters could remember. The story was told of how one, tired of the world and its shams, had crept away from the haunts of men to go and live among the crags of the mountains, whose lofty peaks touched the sky. Once in a great while someone saw him far in the distance as he stood motionless on the shore of some mountain lake, or walked slowly along the brow of some barren hill, silhouetted against the sky. He was known as the Old Man of the Mountain, the hermit of the mighty peaks. Some said he was good, some said he was strange and cruel, but all loved to tell of him, to conjecture, and to speculate. Once, in the course of human events, there climbed up the mountain path that wound in and out along its rugged slopes a whistling youth, a strung bow in his hand, a quiver of feathered arrows, and a pack on his back. He was going into the hills to hunt. With the enthusiasm of youth, he would slay the mountain lion and the bear, the deer and the wolves, whose howlings he had heard from the valleys below. The hours went by as the hunter persistently followed the tortuous path. The gloom of evening fell, and still he was far from the crest of the lofty hill where little scrub pines appeared in relief against the ever-present cap of snow. The chill of the mountain was in the air. The valley below was long since dark, and tiny twinkling lights revealed the abodes of men. Still, the glow of daylight was on the mountain peak, and as the youth stood there in the twilight, he was startled by the sound of breaking twigs and swishing branches. Looking quickly around, he saw standing before him a mighty stag, whose great arched antlers had a span of many feet, and whose noble head was raised to catch the slightest warning sound. Two large, mild eyes gazed at the youth, who, with the frenzy of the hunter, hurriedly raised his bow and aimed a barbed shaft at the heart of the stag, and with the utmost precision drew it to its head. Just as he was about to release the deadly shaft, a hand was laid upon his arm. The youth started, the bow slipped from his already nervous fingers, and he turned in surprise to look into the face of a strange being. As he turned, his amazement increased, for such a figure few men have seen. The face bore the marks of great age, and the snowy locks were whiter far than the mountain tops, which had existed since the beginning. The figure was that of an old man, draped from head to foot in a cowl of gray cloth. In his hand he carried a great wooden staff, cut from the limb of a dead tree. His eyes, however, were the wonder of the picture, two kindly, twinkling eyes that registered even the faintest shades of emotion, one moment gleaming with the joy and life of youth, and the next dimmed by the tears of sorrow, gazed into the face of the hunter. The old man laid one hand slightly upon his shoulder, and the sweet old face held soft rebuke. You, began the youth, are you not the old man of the mountain? The stranger nodded his head, and a voice, mellowed by years of goodness, answered softly and kindly, Yes, I am the hermit who lives in these hills. But why do you shoot my stag? Your stag! Exclaimed the boy hunter. How comes it that you own the beast? In this world, the other replied, proper use warrants ownership, and those who use God's creatures well have the first claim upon them. The old man held out his hand to the stag, and the great beast, though viewing the hunter askance, came slowly across the little clearing and rubbed its soft face against the friendly hand. The hermit put his arm around the neck of the stag and spoke to it in soft musical tones. Just a few sighing sounds the old man made, but the beast seemed to understand. Its soft nose was turned upward, and its eyes looked at him with a tenderness of expression which moved even the hunter. The hermit turned to the youth. Do you still dispute my ownership? He asked. Do you still doubt that he is mine, and I am his? What were the words you used? Asked the youth in surprise. How did you talk to him? I spoke in the words of the forest and the trees, he answered. That is his language. He hears the voice of fear in the crackling of the twigs and the stealthy footsteps of the hunter. He hears life and love in the voice of the waterfall and the soft swaying of leafy branches. These are the sounds of his language, and during these many years in the mountains, I have learned to talk with the tongue of beast and bird. Yes, I have even learned to talk with the trees and flowers, who hear my voice and shelter me with their love and protection. Listen. The old man breathed out a soft, stirring sound like the breath of dawn in the treetops, and from the surrounding shrubs and brushes came an answer, the same soft, stirring sound, and voices seemed to whisper, They all know me, and they all love me. For I have lived here 80 years, and never have I injured one of God's creatures. When I want food, they bring it to me from their store. The squirrels bring me nuts from their harvest, while the trees give me of their fruit, and from their own dried leaves form a shelter which protects me in the chill of winter. You have come into these hills, as the spirit of man oft-time comes into the world, to hate and to slay. Not that you really care, for inwardly you do not loathe the beasts, but to you their souls mean no more than a drop of water from yonder stream. But I have learned to look with love upon even the drops of water, for each one has a message. I have lived up here so long that the trees and birds and flowers are one with me in spirit. I love them all, and truly they love me. Come, young hunter, lay your bow aside for a while, for to me and to the eyes of my children of the forest, that weapon means hate and death. You need not fear. Leave it here, and I will bring you back for it anon. The youth laid down his bow and quiver, and, taking the hand held out to him, accompanied the old man into the depth of the great green forest wrapped in evening shades. Massive trunks rose up about them, and falling leaves descended like a gentle rain upon them as they passed. Suddenly the old man stopped. Look, he said. From the side of a tall tree, A big gray squirrel came and stood pertly, gazing for a few seconds, then vanished like a flash of dusky shadow to appear a second later, carrying in his mouth a ripe hazelnut. Scampering down the rough trunk, he climbed up the hermit's gray robe, and as the old man opened his mouth, the dexterous animal placed therein the hazelnut. Then, hopping onto the old man's shoulder, he sat there, his little beady eyes darting first in one direction and then in another. The hermit took the nut from his mouth and held it out to the hunter. "See how they care for me? But no more tenderly than I have cared for them." He spoke a few soft words to the squirrel, which darted away like some little tree sprite into the darkness of the gathering light. He had barely vanished when the youth suddenly jumped back in fear and amazement. Before them on the road stood a great wolf, his tongue lolling out and his huge tusks bared. A menacing howl broke forth from the beast. "He does not know you," the old man explained. "Whenever he sees men, they throw something at him. Whenever he meets them, he expects the feathered messengers of torture and death that fly from their bows. Therefore, he hates them even as they hate him. But come, you are perfectly safe." Then stepping up to the wolf and bending slightly, he placed his hand between the beast's teeth. The animal drew back its head and licked the kindly hand. "This," explained the hermit, "has its price. If you essayed this feat, your hand would pay the price, and probably your life. But what have you done for the wild creatures that they should love you so?" "I have been true to them. In the cold winter nights, I have sheltered their young in my little cabin. I have fed the babies that the hunters left parentless, and in the spring I have released them. Many years ago, a hunter climbed these hills and slew the sire of this wolf. Another destroyed its mother, and 3 little whelps, 3 howling, fighting, spitting handfuls of flesh, were left to my care. I nourished them and guarded them, and they played with my mountain lions and romped about with the bear cubs that I have in my cabin. The springtime came, and they went their way, strong enough to protect themselves. This is one of them, and the other 2 perhaps we shall see also, unless the hunters have slain them." They proceeded farther along the path of nature's miracles. The great stag walked behind them, his arched antlers breaking the tree branches as he passed. "Look here," the old man spoke, pointing to a crotch of a tree just a little way ahead. "In that nest are 4 little birds. Yesterday, an arrow found its mark. There was a flutter of wings, and with a note of agony, the mother bird fell to the ground. There was a great whir of wings, and with a sharp cry of rage, the father bird flew straight into the face of the hunter. Another wicked shaft, and he, too, was laid low without even a fighting chance. Now hear the clamor in that tree." The old man climbed up into the broken stump, and from a fork of the dead pine, he drew a nest in it, several shrilling atoms of life with ugly, featherless bodies and large, gaping beaks. "I shall take these too with me to my cabin, and drop by drop I shall feed them as I have long ago learned to do. Their mother and father are gone, slain by one of my race. But among the beasts and birds I have tried to redeem my people, and to prove to them that a generous spirit still dwells in the heart of man." His tender hand cuddled the tiny birds in their nest, and with soft sounds he sought to quiet them. In a few moments the cries from the nest ceased, and, sheltered by the old man's love, the hungry birdlings were stilled until he could procure them food. The youth marveled at the sight, for he had never supposed that there could be among the world of men one who so loved dumb creatures. The old hermit pointed ahead, through a narrow ravine that opened before them, and there the hunter saw the peaked roof of a small cabin surrounded by little fir trees and with an old tile for a chimney. A quaint, picturesque building of logs, but poorly matched. Still this simple structure was enthroned in the midst of a realm more beautiful than words can describe. Far below the valley spread out beneath the rolling hills. Through it ran a melting stream, while behind it rose the peaks of the snow-capped mountains. This indeed was a home in the heart of nature. About the house could be seen a number of animals, A baby wildcat rolled in the sunlight, and an old bear was asleep with his nose between his paws, his tail just a tiny stump that wiggled mechanically as he sensed in his sleep the presence of his friend. Birds were roosting in the trees nearby, and within a dozen feet of the dwelling were 20 birds' nests, for it seemed the little creatures of the air liked to come and build their homes around the cabin door. The old man invited the youth within. They entered and sat upon sawed-off ends of logs which served as seats. The cabin was bare of furnishings, save a rough straw pallet, and the only ornament was an ivory crucifix which hung upon the wall. The room was filled with birds and squirrels, and the young hunter stared in astonishment when he saw that a small hummingbird had built its nest in the arms of the crucifix. He then looked about the stove or food, but there was no sign of either. "So this is your home?" he murmured. "This is where the old man of the mountain lives?" "Yes," the hermit answered, "and here he has lived since the day when he realized that his brother man was false and that the beast was true. In all the world of men, I found never a friend half so faithful or half so true as these wild creatures that live among the hills. When I look back at the sorrows of my life, and the tears come to my eyes, my little birds all gather around me and sing their love songs into my ears. When I am tired, the great stag comes and bends his back that I may ride him. When I am hungry, from the mountains and caves come birds and beasts with food for me. I have given up the world of human affairs to serve the things which man abuses, the things to which he has been false. These birds, these little creatures that play around my door, even the wolves, the foxes, and the mountain lions, they are my brothers, and I their father and elder brother. I ease the wounds that heartless hunters make, and they know that while I live in these mountains, they have one friend in the world of men who will never be untrue. All the time that I have dwelt here, I have never spoken one harsh word to beast or bird, yet they serve me with perfect faith and perfect trust." A strange emotion filled the heart of the hunter. "I shall hunt no more," he declared, "for I have seen the life and love and light in the souls of these beasts. I shall be true to it." "That is well," said the old man slowly, and he extended his hand. "Brother, I am proud that you have seen the light, which shall sometime take from the world the karmic curse that rests upon all who slay their brothers. But night is falling in the mountain. In the air I hear the cries of the bears and lions. I hear the piteous wails of dying beasts, and I must go on my way. So I will not take you back again to where I met you. I am an old man, and I have not much longer to stay here. But when I am gone, will you be true to the beasts whom I have loved and guarded, and who have loved me so well in return?" "Yes," he answered the youth with vehemence. "To me also the world has been an empty place, and I will fill that emptiness with the same thing which you have filled yours. If you are called, I promise that I will come and live in your little hut, and go about as you do, serving the beasts." The old man stood for a few seconds, dimly visible in his soft gray gown, while the youth, lightened by the waning moon, descended the winding path to the world that lay below. Chapter 2. 4 years had passed before the youth again went up into the mountains. 4 years of sunshine and of rain. 4 years that had changed the affairs of men, but left the mountains just the same, save that the tightening band of civilization had ever crowded in closer and closer. The green grass, the lofty pines, and the wide expanse of glistening snow apparently had not changed at all. One morning as the sun rose, a strange scene confronted the eyes of the residents of those hills and valleys. Over the mountain there hung a great gray cloud, which twisted, writhed, and seethed in a million ever-changing convolutions. The whole atmosphere was hushed and still. Leaden silence hung over nature. Hunters and trappers whispered that they never before in all the years they had lived among the hills had they witnessed such a mysterious sight. As the day wore on, the dark cloud deepened. A low moan broke out of the heavens, It rose and fell with the passing of the winds, a sound like the sigh of the dying. Each tree seemed to pick it up, and to carry its echoes ever onward through leaves and branches. Little shrubs and bushes seemed to bow their heads, while the arms of the lofty pines drooped inert in the steely light. From among the rocks great groanings came forth. Boulders and masses of earth became thundering avalanches, while the snow upon the crest turned gray, and everything seemed to hang in suspense during nature's agitation. The day the youth was impelled to climb again the mountain, and so he wound in and out along the little path and, following intuitional guidance, branching off from it, reached the point where the valley began and the mountain peaks ended. There among the rocks, half hidden by the darkness, stood the little cabin as he had seen it before. But now, all seemed changed. He shrank back in wonder, for out of the mountains, out of the very earth itself, out of the skies, and up out of the waters of the river that flowed by the door, a great stream was coming, a stream of living creatures, stately stags and meek-dyed does, surrounded by their young, moved through the forests in silent majesty. Great lumbering bears came also, not one, but many. The air was filled with the humming, droning of the wings of birds, and even the steely light was shadowed by the multitude of their wings. From the forest came the wolves and foxes, and in the little pool by the cabin door fishes of many colors gathered, swimming to and fro in such numbers that the water seemed one living mass. Then it seemed that the great heads of the pine trees were bowed, their branches bent low, and from the mountain tops a great cloud of leaves and fine pine needles descended like rain upon the cabin. All nature was united in a strange, sad song. The very earth itself seemed to join in a solemn dirge. In awe and fear the youth crept to the cabin door and gazed within. There on his pallet of straw lay the old man of the mountain, his hands folded upon his breast, his white beard spread upon his cowl, and his eyes closed. Without entering, the youth knew the tragic truth. The hermit was dead. At the foot of the rough wooden pallet stood the great arched antlered stag, his head down so that his soft nose rested on the edge of the couch. In the hollow of the old man's arm sat the gray squirrel, trying to force a hazelnut between the cold, white lips. Little birds were shrilly crying as they circled around his head, and the great wolf lay like a watchdog before the body of the one he loved. The soft scent of the forest came in through the door, which stood ajar, for in the old cabin that door was never closed. Baby birds in their nests called for the hand which could feed them no more. Tears poured over the youth's face as he gazed. Nature's children knew they had lost their truest friend. In all the world that taunted, one alone had loved them. In a world that slew and hated, and thoughtlessly robbed them of their right to live, they had found one who understood. And now the cold fingers of death had closed his eyes, and the chilly voice of the mountain peaks had whispered in his ears. To whom could they go, now that their friend was dead? Soon again, the rude hand of the huntsman would have no sweet voice to offset it. The beasts knew this, and were sad. The youth stood for several seconds, unable to take his eyes from the scene. A great something welled up in his soul, and he remembered the promise he had made, his promise to be true to these furred and feathered friends. He passed slowly through the cabin door. The great wolf looked at him, but did not move. Just a low howl, like a groan of despair, broke from the beast's throat. As he touched the still form of the hermit, the squirrel raised his eyes, beady bright eyes like the sparks of fire, and two tiny paws reached out to cover the face of the master he had loved. The youth stroked the little beast as it lay stretched out upon the body of the dead and biting his lip to hold in check the pain of his soul. The hunter of the days gone by stepped to the door of the cabin and gazed out. He stared it back in sheer amazement. Such a sight as met his vision had never before confronted man, nor probably ever will again. As far as the eyes could reach, in every direction, the mountains and valleys were alive. It seemed as if all the denizens of the wild had gathered there. The heavy gray clouds over the mountains rumbled and moaned, and the lurid flashes of lightning rent their hazy depths. A gentle rain was falling, pattering among the leaves, and the youth, looking at the form on the couch, murmured, "Indeed, blessed are the dead, that the rain raineth upon." A voice within him spoke, saying, "When has such a homage been done to living man? Has emperor or king had such a retinue as this? Many noble ladies and distinguished men march in the funeral trains of the great. Many there are who come and pay respect to a nation's dead, ofttimes with indifference. But each creature that stands in this great cortege is true to the soul of its being. Here is no sham, no pretense. Each one of these beasts, to its very soul, adores the one to whom it pays homage. Each of these little furred and feathered folk would gladly die for that one. Each tree and stone would give of its fleeting life the fullest and the utmost. When man has a friend among the beasts and birds, that man is good, for there is no guile in their lies, no subtleness in their adoration." The youth was overcome, and sinking upon his knees, gazed out at the endless stream of dumb creatures whose sorrowing eyes, lowered heads, and drooping bodies expressed the emotions of their souls. The great trees, even the blades of grass, bent their heads, for the one who loved them all had gone forever. "This is my task," murmured the youth, "and I will fulfill it. What greater proof has man of the depth of his sincerity than that such a circle of affection should surround him? I will not go back into the valley again. I will stay and serve these beasts and birds, as did the old man of the mountain." The shades of night fell over the mountains, but they were alight that night with a million fires. A million flaming altars sent up their sacrifices, and through the darkness gleaming coals of fire. The eyes of the silent watchers, row after row, stretched out endlessly. The next morning, when the sun rose, a new hermit was living in the mountains. Under a cross of rocks, the body of the aged man was laid to rest, while his spirit interceded before a greater throne for the beasts that he had loved. The greater cowl was worn by another, the staff strengthened by another's hand. So through the years that went rapidly by, in his love for nature, the one who once had slain nursed the wounds that he had made. The birds and beasts learned to know him also, and soon they gathered around his door, to whisper their secrets in his ear, and tell their love stories to his soul. Some there were who gradually forgot the friend who had gone, and loved him anew in the one he had awakened. Down in the village, none knew what had happened. They did not realize that the hermit of the pines was dead, for still his gray-cowled figure wandered among the hills. They used to say, "How is it that a man should be willing to live with beasts?" The old hermit had known the secret, and the younger one was fast learning it. And so, the legend says, that to this day in the heart of those hills there lives an insane old man, broken by some earthly sorrow, who has given up the benefits of human affection to live in the mountains like a beast. They laugh about him in the village, and they lay wagers as to who shall find his bones. But at the same time they tell you of that wonderful day years ago, when the mountains grew dark, and the beasts flocked together, and the great miracle took place in the hills. That story will never die in the little village at the base of the mountains. In awe, they tell you of the thunder and of the lightning. The superstitious cross themselves and say that the Spirit of God himself walked the hills that day. They never know, nor will they ever know, that this was nature's homage, nature's only way of showing its reverence and its love for the old hermit in the gray cowl, who lived in the little cabin where the valley meets the hills.